Unwrapped from Mitie.
Hello and welcome to FM Unwrapped. This is a podcast from Mitie looking at how valuable data analytics can unlock the full potential of buildings and people. I'm your host, Justine Green. We'll meet our guests in a moment. And later, we'll be hearing from our reporter, Rick Kelsey.
That's right, Justine. I'm at Aston Martin Red Bull Racing Formula One team here in Milton Keynes to find out how advanced technology used in their race cars is being applied to benefit both the building and human performance here.
Thanks, Rick. Now, joining me in the studio are Kath Fontana, who's the Managing Director for Mitie's Government and Critical Infrastructure Division, and also the President-elect of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. Welcome, Kath.
Hello, Justine.
Now, you've only been with the company 10 months. How are you finding it?
Fantastic. It's really refreshing to work with an organisation that's so focused on key trends in the industry like digital. One of the reasons I joined the business was the digital transformation journey that we're on. So it's been really exciting the last 10 months, seeing that come to life.
And Dan Hughes, who's a property technology expert from Alpha Property Insight. Welcome, Dan.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
And what's your background?
I've worked in the real estate sector and data for most of my career, and so it's something that I've been very fortunate to look at from a number of different perspectives. And it's now going up the agenda, so delighted to be talking about it.
So, Kath, Mitie has just published a comprehensive report called Digital Transformation Is Facilities Management Ready? Clearly an important topic. What are the aims of the report?
Well, we created the report to have a look at the readiness of the facilities management industry to address the challenges of big data that are absolutely on everybody's agenda. And we really wanted to share that insight with our customers so that they could benchmark themselves, firstly, against their peers, and then to help them to consider what their strategy should be in terms of their operational building data.
Part of the report focuses on data and skills. Can you give us an overview of what the report says about this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of respondents wanted to get more value from the data they have about their buildings. And over half of them thought that leveraging that data to improve the efficiency of their asset was really important. And interestingly, if you can sort of contrast that with the RICS Big Data in FM report from last year, only 72% of organisations then felt that they were at an early stage of readiness. So clearly there's a desire for organisations to improve in this area, but very few are actually at any state of maturity where they could leverage that data. So actionable data can really enable organisations to unlock insights about their building. And very importantly, I think, more and more, data attached to buildings is becoming part of that asset's value.
We'll look more at what new skills are needed later. But Dan, an interesting observation recently from The Economist, they say data is now more valuable than crude oil. So what sort of data is most useful to facilities managers?
There's certainly an awful lot of data being collected and is available for people to use now. But I think what's most important is that you can get insight out of it. It's actionable and you can do something with it. As Kath suggested, we're collecting data all over the place. But unless you can do something with it and improve the building performance, then there's not a huge amount of point in doing that. I think that you could probably split the categories down into data about the buildings themselves, about the services that you provide, and most crucially of all, about the occupier and the people within the building.
Technology is moving so fast today. What sort of trends in data measurement do you see in the future?
I think the biggest trend is just the sheer volume of data that's now available to people that hasn't been for many years. And the other one is that more and more data is being collected about the people itself in the building. So historically, FM and the built environment in general has used a lot of data about the assets, about how it performs, and to a degree the services, but very rarely about how the building is performing for the actual people or the performance of the business.
So, Kath, in your view, what should facilities management executives' priorities be for the digital transformation journey?
I think organisations need to really start to think about moving their data to a more strategic level so that they can have a strategy that delivers their business outcomes. So whether they want to improve the productivity of their staff, can they measure the impact of the building on their talent attraction, and really, really importantly, can they demonstrate their contribution to the sustainability agenda through the performance of their buildings. The really clear message that came out from our research was the 3 big practice areas that organisations could really benefit from looking at data were around energy efficiency, security and access control, and M&E installation replacement and better maintenance. And of course, that really supports the sustainability agenda, the cybersecurity agenda, and the need for organisations to really focus on that sustainable reduction of their CO2. So I think, the big industry trends are really driving us towards those key areas. So organisations could hugely benefit from investment in data, analytics and insights in those areas, we think.
Dan.
I think the other thing I would add to that is about the value of data. So we're talking a lot about data, about how it can make buildings better or people better and improve performance. But data has a value in itself, both for companies and also for the buildings. So increasingly, we're going to see the collection and use of data as critical to the value of either companies or of the buildings themselves.
We'll pause just there. And next, we're visiting Red Bull Racing.
FM Unwrapped.
Well, as you can imagine, performance is top of the agenda for the Aston Martin Formula One Red Bull Racing team, and not just on the track. In partnership with Mitie, the team are optimising high-performance data in Milton Keynes, where they design and build the race cars. Our reporter, Rick Kelsey, is there. Rick.
Thanks, Justine. We're in the workshop here in Milton Keynes. Lots of car parts and carbon fibre being moved around and a couple of race cars being worked on by technicians. It all is really very brightly lit and clean. With me is Rob Higdon, the facilities manager at Aston Martin Red Bull Racing. So take me through some of the sensors that we can see on these cars then, and what you've done here to improve performance inside the car.
So as you can see behind us, this is a modern day F1 car. We have hundreds of sensors on these cars that allow us to analyse what the car's doing at any moment in time. That data is then analysed by engineers and allows us to optimise the setup on the car sort of over the course of the season and over the course of a race weekend.
How are you using the data from inside the cars to improve actual human workplace performance?
A couple of years ago, we kind of looked at the way we analyse data on cars, and we spoke to Mitie about how we might be able to do something similar within our buildings. So basically to understand better how the buildings are operating, what kind of working environment we're providing for our staff. And we monitor things like light levels, CO2 levels, noise, sort of key parameters within people's working environment. We've taken that data away, and then we've looked at ways of optimising their place of work around that.
Right, Rob, where have you brought us to now?
Okay, so we're now in one of our office environments. This is a space we chose to fill up with sensors, basically to understand the environment better.
And CO2 is something that you monitor pretty closely as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of research into how high CO2 levels can affect people's performance, specifically productivity. So we monitor CO2 levels to make sure we're not breaching thresholds where we believe that productivity could reduce over periods of time.
It's amazing what you're doing, with light, temperatures, humidity and noise, working with those sensors from the car and bringing them into the workplace environment here. But is there ever a danger of too much data that you lose some of the human approach?
The data is purely an extra level of information. You cannot go away from perception, by talking to people, communicating with them, understanding what's going on.
Lovely stuff, Rob. Back to you in the studio, Justine.
Rick Kelsey reporting there. Dan, how can other organisations drive up performance and improve employee well-being using building data and people analytics?
Well, I think for many years what we've done is we've measured the inputs into a building. So some great examples in that case study there are things like lighting levels and air quality. But what we haven't done so much is measure the actual outputs, so how productive people are. And what we're able to do as we collect more and more data is compare those two things to actually see how the lighting levels does affect performance, how the air quality does affect it. So the more data that we have that we can action, we can start seeing the changes that we make and how they then impact what's going on afterwards.
And Kath, something that comes along with data collection and people analytics is the issue of privacy. So what about the individual's privacy when a company is harvesting data from its business?
The ethical dimensions of workplace digitisation adds concerns for many facilities management and real estate professions. And these concerns come at a time when privacy and personal data rights dominate mainstream media, as we know. So really, to preempt these issues, organisations need to do two things. Firstly, they really need to identify the real business problem they are trying to solve to make sure they're not collecting unnecessary data. And this, as I said earlier, is a real challenge for facilities management because we have so much unstructured data. And secondly, we need to ensure and make it really clear to our employees that technology monitoring the workplace has to be anonymised and is never gathered at the expense of their well-being or privacy. And indeed, it's collected to try and improve their well-being.
How do you reassure employees that they're not being spied on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think if we look at people's behaviours in terms of how they use their phones, how they use the internet, and are they really that concerned? I think where it becomes an issue is how it's been used. I think most people understand that data is collected. It's the ethical use of that data that can compromise trust. So I think it's much more about not collecting it, but being really clear about how you'll use it.
What do you think, Dan?
I agree. I think ethics of data use and what's collected is the biggest single problem facing the real estate sector. I think that in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see the people within buildings becoming much more educated. And I think it's responsibility of facilities managers and property managers at the moment to really get on the front foot with that. I think, as Kath is saying, transparency and openness is the way to go.
In our final part next, we'll be focusing on skills. Kath, looking at skills, should people be upgrading their own skill set to do well in this digital age?
Absolutely. I mean, traditionally in facilities management, we've separated the responsibilities of customer service, relationship management, and those very input-driven data pieces around cost, efficiency and compliance. Typically, you will find different sets of people doing that work. I think in the future, to capitalise on potential of digital transformation, facilities managers are really going to need to try and combine that skill set of being able to analyse data, produce data, and then be able to talk to their customers about it very effectively and translate it into business outcomes. So I think we're going to be transforming ourselves a lot, actually, into people that can not only use data, but then be able to translate it into something useful for our customers.
Dan, in terms of facilities management, what sort of skills do executives need to have? Does everyone suddenly need to be a data expert?
I think certainly people need to know a little bit more about data than they have done in the past. It's a growing topic. It's becoming more important. I similarly don't think that everyone needs to be a data scientist by any stretch. And I think the analogy that you can use is something like the microchip. So for the last 10, 20, 30 years, the world has changed because of technology's microchip. And most people need to do their jobs, they need to understand how it's going to change what they do. So how does mobile phones change things? How do computers change things? But you don't actually need to know the ins and outs of a microchip itself. I think data will be the same in the sense that understanding how data works generally is going to be important, but you don't need to actually put it into practice yourself.
Let's sum up our conversation now. Kath, what are the challenges faced by facilities management around gathering and using data in the workplace?
So I think sieving through the data to look for the nuggets of gold is going to be a really important issue for us. So we do already create significant amount of data. We have quite sophisticated software already. So trying to identify on a customer by customer basis, actually, what data is really important and what will enable our customers to deliver actionable activities through our insights. I think we talked about ethics and privacy concerns for staff, as well as cyber security concerns for organisations that clearly would never want their data to be stolen. And then finally, having the skills and aptitude to analyse the data to identify trends, patterns and opportunities so that you can have those meaningful conversations with your customers. I think a really important point actually is the link between facilities management and the wider built environment. The value of data in operational buildings is becoming more and more important, particularly around the rental value of buildings and the valuation of buildings generally. So facilities managers need to start to understand how we link into the broader ecosystem and be able to provide our customers that information so that actually their asset is being properly managed and they can preserve the value of their asset in the long term.
And Dan, against those challenges, what are the wins?
I think there are a lot of wins for two categories, really. The building itself, so it can perform much better. The people in there operate better and are more productive. It can be much more sustainable, lower costs, more flexible and so on. And also for the FM companies themselves embracing this, I think they not only avoid all the risks which are going to come down the track towards them, but also it's very clear that clients are starting to look for the use of data and technology when they're winning work or when they're allocating work. So I think it's a very much a commercial need for companies to demonstrate that they're embracing this and they're really driving the agenda forward to win work.
Dan, Kath, thanks both for joining us and sharing the benefit of your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
That's it for this podcast from Mitie. I hope our conversation has stimulated you to think about data and skills. I'm Justine Green. Thanks for listening and goodbye.
If you'd like to know more about the report Digital Transformation, is facilities management ready? Go to www.info.mitie.com/digital transformation.